1864, 6 a.m., the hills south of Nashville, Tennessee. Frost clings to the earthworks. Smoke rises from 1,000 Confederate campfires scattered across the ridgeline. In the trenches, soldiers wrapped in threadbare blankets stamp their feet against the cold, their breath hanging in the morning air like ghosts. General John Bell Hood stands on a low rise, surveying the Union lines to the north. His left leg is gone, lost at Chickamauga. His left arm hangs useless, shattered at Gettysburg. He steadies himself with a crutch, squinting through the dawn haze at the enemy formations assembling in the distance. Behind him, his officers gather, passing tin cups of chicory coffee that tastes like mud. One of them gestures toward a division forming up on the Union left flank. Dark faces, broad shoulders, blue uniforms that look almost black in the weak morning light. USCT regiments, the officer says, his voice dripping with contempt. Colored. Hood doesn't respond. He's heard the reports, seen the intelligence. The United States colored troops, formerly enslaved men, freedmen, contraband runaways, now armed with Springfield rifles and organized into federal regiments, the 13th USCT, the 100th USCT, thousands of them holding positions along General George Thomas's line. The officer spits into the frost. They won't stand. First volley and they'll break like every militia we've ever faced. Around him, other Confederate officers nod. It's become an article of faith in the Southern Command, a belief so deeply held it doesn't require evidence. Black men cannot fight. They lack discipline. They lack courage. They lack the martial spirit that defines a soldier. The very idea is absurd, offensive even. They'd heard the stories from other battlefields, Fort Wagner, the Crater, Milliken's Bend, rumors of USCT units fighting with unexpected ferocity, taking casualties that would shatter white regiments and still holding their ground. But those stories always came secondhand, filtered through the fog of war and northern propaganda. Easy to dismiss, easy to mock. Let them come, another officer says. We'll send them running back to their masters. The irony doesn't register. These men are fighting to preserve a system that kept human beings in chains, and now those same human beings are standing in formation across the field, rifles loaded, bayonets fixed, waiting for the order to advance. Hood turns his attention back to the Union center. His army is battered, depleted. He's lost nearly a third of his force at Franklin 2 weeks ago in a suicidal frontal assault that accomplished nothing except filling the ditches with Confederate dead. Now he's dug in on the hills south of Nashville with maybe 23,000 men, cold, hungry, outnumbered 2-to-1, their backs to the Tennessee wilderness. He knows the math, knows the situation is desperate, but he also knows that George Thomas, the Union commander, is cautious, methodical, slow to attack. If Hood can hold these hills long enough, maybe reinforcements will arrive. Maybe the weather will turn. Maybe something will break in his favor. What he doesn't know, what none of his officers can quite grasp, is that the equation has changed. That across the field, in those USCT regiments they're dismissing as cannon fodder, are men who have been waiting their entire lives for this moment. Men who were whipped, sold, separated from their families, told they were less than human. Men who now carry rifles and wear the uniform of the United States Army. Men who have something to prove. The Confederate artillery opens up first, a rolling thunder of cannon fire that sends shells screaming toward the Union lines. Explosions bloom in the frozen fields. Men scatter, horses rear, but the Union line doesn't break, doesn't falter. And then the drums start, a steady, relentless rhythm that carries across the valley. The Union army begins to move. Hood watches through his field glasses as the blue formations advance, infantry in the center, cavalry sweeping wide on both flanks, and there, on the Union left, the USCT brigades stepping off in perfect parade ground order, rifles at shoulder arms, battle flags snapping in the cold December wind. An officer beside Hood chuckles. Look at them, marching like toy soldiers. But there's something in their movement, something precise and deliberate that makes Hood uneasy. These aren't the shambling, unorganized militia units the Confederates have been routing for 3 years. These are disciplined troops moving with the confidence of veterans. The Union artillery answers, a savage barrage that tears into the Confederate earthworks, splintering timber and sending dirt geysering into the air. The ground shakes, the air fills with smoke and the smell of sulfur. And still, the Union infantry comes. Closer now, you can see individual faces through the haze, hear the sergeants calling cadence, see the glint of bayonets catching the pale morning sun. Hood lowers his field glasses, his jaw tightens. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crosses his face. What if they were wrong?
The first Union assault hits the Confederate right flank at 10 a.m. It's a feint, a probing attack designed to draw Hood's reserves away from his left. The Confederates respond exactly as Thomas predicted, shifting troops eastward, thinning their line, opening gaps they don't realize exist yet. On the Union left, the USCT brigades wait. They've been standing in formation for hours now, watching white regiments advance and fall back, testing the Confederate defenses. The men of the 13th USCT, most of them former slaves from Tennessee and Kentucky, stand with rifles grounded, eyes forward, faces unreadable. Colonel Thomas Jefferson Morgan rides along the line. He's white, like most USCT officers, but he's seen these men train, watched them drill until their movements were sharper than any regiment he'd served with. Listened to their reasons for enlisting. A private named Abraham told him, "I got 3 children still in bondage in Mississippi. I'm fighting to free every last one." Another soldier, a man named Samuel who'd escaped a plantation in Alabama, said simply, "I want them to see us, want them to know we're men." Morgan reins his horse and looks down the line. 2,000 faces. 2,000 men who've been told their entire lives they weren't capable of this, that they were property, tools, things to be bought and sold and worked until they died. "Fix bayonets," Morgan orders. The sound ripples down the line, 2,000 steel blades sliding from scabbards, locking onto rifle barrels with cold metallic clicks. The men don't cheer, don't shout. They just stand there, waiting, the weight of history pressing down on their shoulders like the December cold. At 1 p.m., the order comes. General James Steedman's division, including the USCT brigades, begins its assault on Overton Hill. They move uphill through an open field, no cover, no concealment, just frozen ground and dead grass, and the long slope rising toward the Confederate earthworks at the summit. Every step takes them closer to the tree line where Hood's infantry waits, rifles leveled, fingers on triggers. 300 yards. The Confederates hold their fire. They've learned this lesson the hard way over 3 years of war. Let them get close, then unleash hell all at once. Make every shot count. 200 yards. You can hear the USCT regiments now, not shouting, not singing, just the rhythmic crunch of boots on frozen earth and the rattle of equipment and the ragged breathing of men climbing a hill under 40 pounds of gear, knowing what's waiting at the top. Inside the Confederate works, soldiers peer over the earthen walls. Some of them recognize faces from their own plantations, men they used to own, men they whipped, men whose wives and children they sold downriver. One Confederate private turns to his sergeant. "They're really coming." The sergeant spits tobacco juice into the dirt. They won't make it halfway. 100 yards. Fire! The Confederate line erupts, a wall of flame and smoke that tears across the hillside like the wrath of God. Mini-balls shred the air with that distinctive wasp hum sound that every Civil War soldier knows means death. Men in blue uniforms stumble, fall, cry out. The front rank of the 13th USCT seems to dissolve in the smoke. But the regiment doesn't break. The survivors step over their dead and keep coming. The second rank moves up to fill the gaps. Officers wave their swords. Sergeants roar orders that are barely audible over the gunfire. And the line keeps advancing, slower now, men leaning forward like they're walking into a gale, but still moving, still climbing. The Confederates reload, fire again. Another volley that should shatter any attack, should send men running back down the hill in blind panic. The USCT regiments take the casualties and keep coming. 75 yards. Inside the Confederate earthworks, panic starts to spread. These aren't supposed to be soldiers. They're supposed to be slaves, docile, obedient, broken. But the men climbing that hill aren't broken. They're coming with a fury that has nothing to do with tactics or strategy, and everything to do with 400 years of rage finally finding an outlet. 50 yards. Charge! The USCT brigades surge forward, not running, not breaking formation, moving with disciplined precision even as Confederate fire rips through their ranks. They're screaming now, a sound that chills the blood of every Southern soldier who hears it. Not the rebel yell, something deeper, something primal, the sound of men who have nothing left to lose. 20 yards. The Confederates fire one last desperate volley at point-blank range. Men in blue uniforms go down like wheat before a scythe. But there are too many still standing, too many still coming. And then the USCT troops hit the earthworks. Bayonets flash, rifle butts swing. Men grapple hand to hand in the smoke and chaos. A Confederate officer tries to rally his men, screaming orders that no one can hear. A private from the 13th USCT, a man named Isaac, who was born in chains on a plantation 20 miles from this hill, drives his bayonet through a Confederate sergeant's chest and keeps moving, kept pushing forward into the breach. The Confederate line breaks. Not slowly, not in stages, all at once, like a dam giving way. Southern soldiers throw down their rifles and run. Officers try to stop them, try to restore order, but it's too late. The panic is spreading. The entire right flank is collapsing. Colonel Morgan stands in the captured earthworks, breathing hard, looking at the carnage around him. Bodies everywhere, blue and gray mixed together in the mud. The 13th USCT has taken 40% casualties, 400 men dead or wounded in less than an hour. But they took the hill. And 2 miles to the west, Hood's entire defensive line is starting to crumble.
By 3 p.m., Hood's army is disintegrating. What started as a crack in the Confederate right flank has become a complete collapse. Union cavalry, thousands of horsemen under General James Wilson, pour through the gap, wheeling behind Hood's fortifications, cutting off retreat routes, spreading chaos through the Confederate rear. Artillery batteries that should be firing at the enemy are instead limbering up and fleeing. Supply wagons overturn in the mud. Regiments that held their ground all morning suddenly find themselves surrounded. On Shies Hill, the western anchor of Hood's line, Confederate soldiers watch the disaster unfold with mounting horror. They can see Union troops swarming over positions that were supposed to be impregnable, can hear the roar of battle getting closer, can see their own comrades streaming south in full retreat. General Hood sits his horse on a ridgeline, face ashen, watching his army fall apart. The officers around him have stopped making suggestions, stopped offering reassurances. They just stare at the spectacle below. 23,000 men breaking like glass, formations dissolving, 3 years of warfare ending in 2 hours of catastrophic defeat. A messenger rides up, his horse lathered and wild-eyed. "Sir, the enemy has taken the Granny White Pike. The Franklin Pike is under artillery fire. We're cut off." Hood doesn't respond, can't respond. He's watching the USCT regiments, those soldiers his officers mocked this morning, now fighting with the same disciplined ferocity across the entire battlefield. They're not just holding ground, they're advancing, taking prisoners, capturing artillery, moving like veteran troops who've been doing this for years. Because, in a sense, they have been.
Every day of enslavement was combat. Every moment of survival was a battle. They learned discipline under the lash, learned endurance in the fields, learned to keep moving when every muscle screamed for rest. And now, all that pain, all that suffering has been weaponized and turned back on the men who inflicted it. By 4 p.m., it's not a battle anymore. It's a rout. Confederate soldiers throw away their rifles and run, not toward defensive positions, not in organized retreat, just running, south, east, anywhere that isn't here. Officers try to form rear guards and watch their men melt away into the Tennessee wilderness. Artillery pieces are abandoned, still loaded, pointing at an enemy that's already past them. The USCT regiments press forward, taking prisoner after prisoner. A sergeant from the 100th USCT, a man named Elijah, who was sold away from his family in Virginia 12 years ago, accepts the surrender of a Confederate captain. The captain won't meet his eyes, won't acknowledge him, just hands over his sword and stares at the ground, his face burning with shame. Elijah takes the sword without a word, has nothing to say, nothing that would matter. The sun sets on December 15th over a battlefield that has fundamentally changed the war. Hood's Army of Tennessee, the force that was supposed to threaten the Union rear, draw Sherman away from his march to the sea, maybe even push north into Kentucky, has been destroyed. Not defeated, destroyed. It will never fight as a coherent force again. Union casualties, roughly 3,000. Confederate casualties, 6,000, plus another 4,500 captured. An entire army shattered in 2 hours. In the captured Confederate camps that night, USCT soldiers sit around fires built from enemy timber, eating rations taken from enemy supply wagons. Some of them write letters home, cramped, careful letters written by men who learned to read in secret under penalty of whipping. They write to wives still in bondage, to children they haven't seen in years, to communities waiting for news that the impossible has happened, that they fought, that they won, that they proved every slaver, every Confederate officer, every person who called them property, proved all of them wrong. Private Abraham, the man who joined to free his 3 children in Mississippi, sits with his back against an artillery piece, looking at the stars. He's exhausted. His uniform is torn and blood-stained. He's seen friends die today, good men who will never see freedom's full promise. But he's also seen Confederate soldiers run, seen them surrender, seen the look in their eyes when they realized that the men they dismissed as subhuman had just beaten them in open combat. Across the South, the news will spread slowly. In slave quarters and contraband camps and Union-occupied cities, black communities will hear what happened at Nashville. They'll hear that 200,000 men of color are now serving in the Union Army, that they're fighting, winning, changing the course of the war. And in Confederate headquarters from Richmond to Mobile, generals will have to reckon with a new reality, that their assumptions were wrong, their certainty was arrogance, their mockery was delusion. That the men they enslaved were always capable of this, always had this courage, this discipline, this capacity for military excellence. The only thing that changed was the opportunity, the rifle in their hands, the uniform on their backs, the chance to fight for their own freedom instead of someone else's profit. December 15th, 1964, the day Nashville fell in 2 hours. The day 200,000 black soldiers changed everything.